You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-hosts Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing good, man. It is we're on the home stretch. So this is the high volume drafting week really across the country as things kind of get done this weekend and through Labor Day weekend. There's draft parties, there's draft events, there's just drafting on the couch while you're watching college football because that's starting. There's all sorts of there's Skypes and Teams and everything else to kind of video chat in if your buddies, all aren't able to make it to a central location. But this is it. This is the final weekend. This is what all the preparation has been about since basically March, as we've been talking about that, and then especially April after the rookie draft. But hell, we're here. We got our home league draft on Sunday night, so I'm super excited about that. But I'm living my best life right now. How are you guys?
Doing all right. Before Alex answers, real quick shameless plug: the videos. When you're on the clock or about to be on the clock, and you're going, man, who do I look at? What do the boys think about this? Don't worry, we got you. Videos up on YouTube. Go over there, check it out, like, subscribe.
Good point. And I know we're going to get into talking about some draft strategies and some guys and all that stuff and what we'll get into here for this episode. But Kevin touched on it a little bit. It's exciting because college football's back, and that's fun. Today, it's a mixed bag day, I think, for a lot of players in the NFL because it was cut day. So every team getting down to their 53-man roster. There were a few names that did not survive that I think a lot of people were hoping would be there. Noted, how do I say this? Noted show favorite, Terrace Marshall, got cut by the Panthers. So it's a brutal business sometime. We know that Tim Patrick with the Broncos, he wasn't going to survive the cut. And that's tough because the last 2 years his season ended before it ever started with injuries. Although I do see that it looks like the Lions are going to sign him. So if you're looking for a reason to root for those kneecap biters, go after Tim Patrick. And I think he could, if he finds his way onto the, getting some playing time, that'd be nice. There were some other injury news that we should probably talk about. I don't think has seismic consequence in fantasy football, but there is some. It's not inconsequential. AJ Dillon is going to be down for the whole year. Am I seeing correctly? This is Elijah Mitchell is down for the whole season.
Yeah.
That one, which again,
that one hurts on a couple best ball teams I have. I was picking him up, and I didn't even have McCaffrey, but I was picking him up in case McCaffrey did go down. And I don't know that anybody in any best ball league that I was in picked up Jordan Mason.
Yeah, so that'll be a hot commodity here.
If McCaffrey goes down, the San Francisco run game is relatively useless outside of Deebo Samuel.
We saw, who is it? The name is escaping me. Browns running back is out for at least 4 games.
Yeah, Chubb's on the PUP list.
Chubb, yes, thank you.
Hawkinson's on the PUP list.
We know that the Bengals say that they're expecting Jamar Chase will play week 1. So I think there's a sigh of relief for everybody. I think that's we'll believe it when we see it situation. But the Bengals say he's going to play. CD got paid. So that was nice for a lot of CD Lamb owners in Dynasty Leagues to make sure that he's still getting his. Go ahead.
So I'm going to jump in there real quick because CD got paid appropriately, right?
Yes.
CD is a top 3 receiver in the NFL, got less money than Justin Jefferson, and got paid appropriately. My hang up about this Jamar Chase deal has been Jamar Chase wants more than Justin Jefferson. Jamar Chase is not worth more than Justin Jefferson. Like, he is not the same player. He is not as good. Like, I get being the next guy up and resetting the market and everything else, but this is going to be interesting. And if I'm T. Higgins, I'm thinking, well, hell, I just signed the franchise tag. Like, I reported to camp and did all this. Like, there's got to be some good favor built up with me here, because there's
Yeah.
a good chance on God's green earth the Bengals can sign both of those guys next offseason. So either Higgins is going to get let go, because I don't think they're going to want to franchise him twice, or they're just going to come to the offering table. All right, both of you, here's our best offer. We believe we can win with either one of you and drain Burton and whoever else we're going to draft next year. And this is what it is. Like, it's going to be really interesting in Cleveland. Like, their window of being a, I guess, super high power offense, right, with Joe Burrow and a stack of receivers is closing, right? First, Joe Mixon left. Now, this is your last year with your receivers. And then, like, they're mostly gone too. And then you're going to hope Joe Burrow can do the Patrick Mahomes thing and make a bunch out of nothing.
Yeah.
Well, and the interesting thing about Jamar Chase too is he was already under contract for this year, and the Bengals had already picked up his 5th-year option. So he was going into this one with two full years still under contract.
Mm-hmm.
Unrelated, and again, probably doesn't have a huge fantasy impact, but the Packers traded for Malik Willis to back up Jordan Love. Is that, you think, a case of similar quarterbacking styles that you don't have to, wholesale change the offense if Love gets hurt? That, you can still just kind of plug and play there. Do you think that that's what the NFL is trying to do now, where they have similar styled quarterbacks in a quarterback room so that it just makes the offense a little bit easier for everybody should one get hurt?
I'm not convinced Malik Willis is in the same stratosphere as Jordan Love, so I don't know why they felt the need to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe Tennessee just said, "Hey, look, you're not going to play here. We're gonna find a way for you to get somewhere else." And they get something out of nothing, right? Your other option is to cut him, then you get nothing. So at least with a trade, you get something.
No, absolutely. All right. So I found the handy dandy sleeper list that I've been following that is keeping a running tally. So notables only: Desmond Ridder, right? They just got Ridder in a trade from Atlanta, which is interesting enough because Rondale Moore, who went to Atlanta, went down with a season-ending injury, and now Desmond Ridder got cut. So both teams are not getting the player that they traded for this season. Michael Carter, he's bounced around to a couple teams. The Ravens cut Russell Gage, which is kind of interesting because the Ravens are not necessarily a team that is big on wide receiver weapons and talent. And Russell Gage had a couple seasons where he made a nice little niche for himself there in Atlanta, right? Like, he primed himself to get a couple opportunities and has not been able to make it stick without Matt Ryan. The Bills, Frank Gore Jr., that's kind of a bummer. I know a lot of people were taking him in dynasty rookie drafts late, especially if you had that 5th round, right? Like, you were grabbing him in like a 5th round type setting. Andy Isabella, again, he's kind of the same guy that they already have, along with, Shakir and Curtis Samuel. So I understand why they did that. KJ Hamler, which was interesting. Terrence Marshall, Donta Foreman. Donta Foreman that the Browns cut is an interesting one, especially with Nick Chubb going on PUP. So there's definitely going to be opportunity for Jerome Ford owners here to start the season, as he's going to play at least the first 4 games, and potentially a really solid role in at least 6, as Nick Chubb is kind of getting his wheels underneath him when he's able to come back. The Cowboys cut Royce Freeman. No big deal about that. Let's see. Noah Brown, Quintez Cephas, Denzel Mims got cut. Kadarius Toney. Here you go. Kadarius Toney, Justin Ross, and Irv Smith Jr. all got cut from the Kansas City Chiefs. But what they did do was Kansas City Chiefs traded for Peyton Hendershot from the Cowboys. So that tells you how much they like what Ferguson is doing, along with Schoonmaker, who they drafted out of Michigan last year. So that made him expendable. The Chargers had a couple interesting ones. Isaiah Spiller, 2 years removed from drafting him. And obviously they brought in Gus. They brought in J.K. Dobbins. Like, he was not Harbaugh's guy, but they got rid of him. Darnold Parham Jr. was a bit of an interesting one. Like, he was a guy, especially in fantasy circles, like, we always felt like this guy could have a little bit of a pop if he ever got like the lead role. Injuries have been a big deal for him, but he didn't make the cut there in LA with the Chargers, but I think he'll find a home here somewhere. The Rams cut Boston Scott, but he signed with the Steelers. They also cut Zach Evans, so they are fully vested in Blake Corum and Kyron Williams. Mike White from the Dolphins got cut. He's signing with Buffalo. That has recently been released.
It's his third NFC East team in 3 years.
Yeah. The Vikings, let's see, Matt Corral, they cut him. Myles Gaskin, N'Keal Harry, the new tight end N'Keal Harry, because he was too fat and slow to play wide receiver after the Patriots drafted him. Dwayne McBride is a little bit of an interesting one that the Vikings cut. So, I mean, they had 4 Kene and Dogwu, I believe. I'm coming close to saying that right. Dwayne McBride. So they're 3 running backs of note that they seemingly don't have any interest in, behind a not injury riddled, but a running back who has not played a full season in the last 3 years. So that one's a little interesting. Bailey Zappi, the fact that the Patriots, I mean, I get it, but they didn't carry him or keep him. The Saints cut Samson Nakua, younger brother of Puka. So it'll be interesting to see where Mr. Nakua ends up, because he made a big highlight in week 3, right, with the kick return.
Yeah.
So that will be interesting. They also released James Robinson, so they're riding the Alvin Kamara, Jameson Williams, and the train with Kendre Miller starting on IR. Now, he's eligible to return, but he's starting on IR. So there's that.
Again,
Paris Campbell, my boy Paris Campbell, right? We wanted to tout him so bad. The Eagles cut him. Paris Campbell's no more. We were wrong about that one. See, we're admitting it.
A couple Broncos connections. Samaje Perine got released by the Broncos. And I can't remember if you mentioned it from the Cowboys, but Royce Freeman also getting released by the Cowboys.
Yeah, but Dalvin Cook's in town. They're talking to him right now. That's actually interesting for a late round guy. I mean, especially with drafts that are just coming up, where maybe people aren't like fully engulfed in the news. Dalvin Cook as a last round flyer is very interesting for a Dallas team that is running back kind of starved, right? You have Zeke, but he's just name power. Like, he's not the all pro Zeke that he was. Same thing with Dalvin Cook. He's not
2018 Dalvin Cook.
Yes, exactly. But it could be interesting, right? You have some savvy veterans who can both catch the ball in the backfield. They're both decent in pass pro. I mean, maybe you can make that work. A running back by committee by old Pro Bowl running backs who still have some juice left in the tank. I don't know. I thought the Niners cuts were a little interesting. With Elijah Moore going on season-ending IR, they also cut Matt Breida and Keyshawn Vaughn. So they're definitely, I'm not saying they're playing with fire, but they're going to keep a shallow running back room here to start with and see. And I think they're hoping one of those guys can end up back on their practice squad. Trey McSorley, Martavius Bryant, I think those are the last one. And Sterling Shepard. Derek's boy Sterling Shepard did not make the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, I mean, kind of a long, drawn-out intro there to kind of go through all these. But there are some interesting ones. Obviously, the deck will get shuffled here in the next couple of days, where these guys sign on practice squads, or if they get signed right to active rosters, being able to do things like that and try and continue their dream of playing in the NFL.
Right. Yeah. I did see, too, one of the reports coming out earlier today that the Cowboys apparently are only interested in signing Dalvin as a practice squad member. So
You know
gotta
how
start
hard
him
it is to
somewhere.
put a practice squad guy on your active roster. It costs a little bit more money because you got to give him a game check, and he has to get a veteran minimum. But yeah,
But
get him in the building.
It's good insurance, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't really know what you have. Deuce Vaughn, you have Zeke, you have
Rico Dwaddle.
Yes,
Yeah.
Rico. Any one of those guys goes down because those two have to play. Those two are playing special teams, right? Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn are playing special teams. They're not good enough not to. So all it takes, you get a little clip and you want to carry 3 backs into your game. All of a sudden, Dalvin's in active roster pretty easily. Like, to me, there's a clear path for that.
Give you another one too, and we can move on from this after if you're good. But OBJ landing on the PUP list, so they'll get a couple weeks out of him down there in Miami.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, all righty. Well, we do have a pretty interesting show here, and some more draft strategy looking through it. We've also got kind of calling the shots on some my guys and some guys that we don't anticipate seeing on our draft boards when the draft's all said and done. Any other thoughts before we start plugging and chugging into some of these?
Oh, let's do it.
All right, awesome. And actually, real quick, before we get going into that, we did have a question come in from YouTube earlier today. Let's go ahead and hit that one up here real quick. So over on YouTube, Gabriel was asking, what's the earliest you would be okay with drafting Kenneth Walker III if you believe he'll be an RB1 status this year? Sounds like it's a hometown type of league where Seattle is the kind of the hometown there. So Seahawk players tend to go early. The viewer really likes Kenneth Walker, so they're contemplating reaching for him. It's a 10-team full PPR, and with the way that the draft is, they'd have to take him at the top of the 3rd round. As the next pick is the bottom of the 4th, and they don't think that Kenneth Walker will be there in the 4th.
Well, that's a bummer because I'd tell you if you're reaching for him, I'd tell him the 4th is all I'd reach.
Yeah, I'm with you there too, Kevin. And I think that there are plenty of other opportunities that don't involve Kenneth Walker, and I think that you might be drinking a little bit of the Seattle talk radio Kool-Aid up there if you think that he's going to be RB1. Yes, there's a pathway where Kenneth Walker does get to RB1 status, but I also think that there are pathways for other guys that are going around him or after him that maybe have a little bit an easier pathway of getting to RB1 status. I'm talking guys like a lot of things would have to go right, but a David Montgomery you could get later. If people are reaching for Kenneth Walker there, then that means that you've got probably a Josh Jacobs still available. Probably, Joe Mixon hangs around there a little bit. I think there are other ways to get around Kenneth Walker, reaching for Kenneth Walker in the 3rd round pick.
Yeah, I wouldn't pay a 3rd round tag for Kenneth Walker. I would let that go. I would rather be interested in I'd rather be interested in a James Cook, a Joe Mixon, a Rachaad White, that type of player. If the Seahawks are getting elevated up, I mean, that also means that really good wide receivers are getting pushed down. So I think I'd rather do that. And then if you want to go back to the reaching phase, I don't think that Seattle is going to run a workhorse running back. I think you are going to see a lot of Zach Charbonnet. They invested a 2nd round pick in him, just like they did Kenneth Walker. New coaching staff, new regime. This offense is going to throw the ball more, and I think you're going to see Charbonnet be a recipient of of some extra targets that you weren't seeing last year. So I think, you could draft Charbonnet in the 9th, 8th. If you wanted to reach, call it the 8th, and do that and have a piece of Seattle's running back room. And that way you're not reaching early, right? Because it's one thing to kind of have your guy and to reach around if you have to, but you're essentially, in an elevated hometown league, you're essentially having to reach 2 rounds for Kenneth Walker, and that early in the draft is too rich for my blood. So I would advise you not to do that. But if you absolutely have to have this guy on your roster, you're going to have to grab him at the end of the 3rd round. I mean, the question is absolutely correct. Like, you have to do that, because I agree. In a hometown league, he's probably not going to be there at the end of the 4th.
Yeah. And I mean, even if it's a 4 or 10 team type of deal there, like there is some of that go out and get your guy and do that, because fantasy is fun, and that's the way you want to go. But I'm with you, gentlemen. I wouldn't be doing that. I would just take the value elsewhere and let the other people's hometown bias feed my championship roster.
Yep.
So
I like winning in fantasy over my hometown team.
Correct.
Which has been really easy to do of late for Broncos fans.
Well, but even when
I know
the Broncos had Peyton in town,
yeah,
go back and look at all my rosters in our hometown league. I didn't have a single Bronco on my roster ever in that entire tenure, throwing up all those touchdowns and everything else. I avoided the Broncos damn near like a plague, because I was not going to fall into that.
They were rich. They cost a lot. Yep. They cost a lot in our league.
Yeah, it's I get it. I totally get it. It's just not something that I subscribe to. You have to be able to compartmentalize and keep fantasy separate from real life, and you can still root your butt off for your hometown Seahawks. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you have to be able to compartmentalize that. Drafting Kenneth Walker in the back of the 3rd round is not conducive to making it easy on yourself for winning a fantasy championship. There's enough headaches and pitfalls and challenges throughout the season. My opinion is you don't need to overdraft anyone by 2 rounds just because you like the team he plays for, and you're hoping that he's going to, sneak into the top 12.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would agree with that. Well, any other thoughts on this question before we start rocking and rolling into one of Alex's favorite draft formats? Okay. So with that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about some auction type of drafts here. And when looking at the draft here and looking at this particular one, it's a salary cap type of draft, an auction type of draft. And with that, Alex, I'll kind of just turn that over to yourself there to kind of explain some of that and kind of set the stage here.
So I've been doing auction drafts in my high school league for way too long. It's been pretty much exclusively an auction draft league. So I've been participating in one, and I've been able to kind of do a few things here and there. I feel like if you're doing a guillotine draft, I think an auction draft is perfect for that. Or if you're doing a guillotine league, an auction draft is perfect because everybody has equal opportunity at the player pool, right? You don't have to, it's not luck of the draw. If you're picking 14th, well, you get to pick 14, 17, and then you're not picking again until 31 or whatever it is. So, but with an auction draft, everybody's got equal opportunity. But with that, there are some pitfalls. So the basics of an auction draft, just so if you aren't sure what it is, instead of picking a player, you nominate a player. And there is a nomination order, much like a simple draft order, where you will go 1 through 10 in your league, and you will nominate a player at a monetary value, and then you will auction however much money that you want until you win the auction for that player. and you continue on until your roster is full. There's a couple different strategies that you can employ, but I think the biggest thing is, before you go into an auction draft, is understanding how much money you have, okay, how much the value of certain players as a percentage of your total money, and then understanding what you need to fill out your roster when it comes time. And then the biggest thing that I can tell you is patience. Patience is the quintessential trait that you have to have when you're doing an auction draft. Because sometimes, if you've ever participated in a live auction before, when you've been up for something, sometimes the player that you don't bid on is the best one, right? Sometimes when you don't go out and spend and overspend for something, that's the best move that you make throughout the course of a draft. So that's kind of the basic of an auction draft, to kind of understand what it is. In terms of budget allocation, again, understanding how much you think a player is valued for. So I'll give you my example. Last year was not that I was smart, but I figured that Tyreek Hill on that Dolphins offense was going to be a very crucial part of how that team would go. So I think, for the sake of the story, I think Tyreek Hill is maybe valued at $45 out of the $200 that you have. That means you're willing to spend essentially a quarter of your budget on one player. Keep in mind, you got to fill out 12 roster spots or whatever it is. I thought that Tyreek Hill was going to be more valuable than $45. I was willing to overspend on what the suggestion was. And it paid off for me. Paid off for me big time, because I was in the championship of that league last year. I think I took runner up, if I'm not mistaken. So Tyreek Hill was a big reason for that, because he ended up being wide receiver 2. And I was okay spending that kind of money. What that does, though, is you have to be judicious and get some bargains elsewhere when it comes to getting another player, right? Or filling out the rest of your roster. Sometimes you want to, when it becomes your turn to nominate, and I'll tell you, one of the strategies that I like to employ is I will nominate guys I don't necessarily want on my roster, but I do want other people to spend money on, to then handicap them for the rest of the go round. Now that can backfire, because people in your league can be tight to start and not a lot of money is going, right? Not players are going for a little bit less than they should, or nobody's really overspending on anything. So the handcuffing or handicapping doesn't really work if players are tight. But we all know that when you have $200 burning a hole in your pocket, theoretically, it's a little easier to throw out $50 on a guy early than it is to wait and only spend $20 on that guy maybe 4 or 5 rounds down the road. So I will try to nominate players I don't necessarily care for or want on my roster, and just try to get people to spend money that way to try and lessen their impact and their ability to bid on players. I've been talking for a while, so I'm going to shut up now and let you guys chime in on some strategies that you guys like to employ in an auction draft.
All right. So, Derek, you want to go, Derek? You want me to?
It's up to you. If you've got a point ready to go, I will defer.
So, I think a very popular strategy in auction drafts is the stars and scrubs strategy. So, what that means is you will go out and you have, 3 or 4 guys all in different price point ranges that you are going to anchor your team around, right? Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, that type of player, right? So you want, if you want 6 players, but of those 6 players, you want them to be basically in the top 4 rounds of what would be a redraft league, right? That's your stars there. And then you're filling out the rest of your lineup with $1, $2, and $3 players. right? So then you're looking for the bottom of the barrel ish, right? When people kind of get a little thin, maybe some less desirables. A couple things to go along with that is, if you go get CD Lamb, right, and you're paying anywhere from $58 to $65 is kind of the price range on CD Lamb. Some hometown leagues, he's probably going to go a bit higher. Now that he's signed, he's probably going to go a bit higher now. His value was dropping. Now we're going to see the rebound. It's going to shoot back up. But to pair with that, maybe you want to look at like a receiver like Cortland Sutton, right? Cortland Sutton is not a sexy pick for receiver, right? He is falling way down draft boards, but he is still the number one option on a team that we suspect is going to be losing football games and going to be able to throw the ball. So you have CeeDee Lamb as your one, but you can still have a number one receiver as your flex type situation. Or the number two receivers on teams a lot of times go for less. Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin is being undervalued right now. People do not understand how he's going to be used in Tampa Bay. He's going to be put back in the slot. Well, what that means for Chris Godwin is there is not going to be press coverage. He's going to see a ton of free releases, and this is his natural home. He is a natural slot receiver who has been playing on the outside for the past few years. They're going to move him back into the slot. So Chris Godwin, from where he's being projected, I think he far surpasses those projections. So if you have a guy like that, right, that's kind of you tear down. You grab a Chris Godwin where you have built-in value there and go. Same thing with running backs. If you want a Breece Hall, right? If you think Breece Hall is going to end up being RB1 for the season, and there's people out there who are making that argument. They think Breece is going to lead the way for running backs this year. You spend $55 on Breece Hall. Well, now you got to pivot down and you have to look at other running backs. So now what are you going to do? Look at Chuba Hubbard, right? Small game sample size. Maybe you can get Jonathan Brooks for cheap because he's starting on the PUP list, right? People might be a little gun shy and don't want to spend a ton of money on there. So now you have the Carolina backfield. Or you look at a Javonte Williams, again, from the Broncos. I know he's going to be sharing time with Jaleel McLaughlin, but we've seen the lead back in Sean Payton's offense be extremely successful before. Alvin Kamara did it for years. And then you had Jamal Williams, who's able to fill in and do some of that. So Javonte is not the receiver that Alvin Kamara is, but Javonte, a full year plus removed from knee surgery, is going to be much better than he was last year. Same thing with Chase Brown from the Bengals, right? He's a later running back who's getting plenty of reps with the first team. We think Cincinnati's going to move away from the anchor running back approach, right, where they just have the workhorse. So you have to start looking for some of those volumes instead of Achane. Look at Raheem Mostert, right? Raheem Mostert's going stupid cheap in auction draft for what he did last year. So you can still get your star, and then you get older players who are still extremely relevant to help fill out the roster in the gaps, and then you fill in with a couple $1 players to fill out your bench. So that's a strategy that a lot of people implement.
Yeah, no, I like that one. That's one that I've done several times there as well, right? Is find the value on these guys and really kind of go after that. And that kind of leads into some of kind of one of the things that I really like kind of implementing in there as well is when it comes to nominating players, right? And so there's a couple of different ways that you can go about doing that and a couple of different strategies out there, right? Some strategies talk about, wait until everybody else has kind of drained their budgets before you start nominating your guys and starting going out after that. But at the same time, right, like if you're waiting a lot of times to try and find the right spot in the draft to nominate the guy you really want, well, there's a couple of things that can happen on that. One, somebody else may nominate that ahead of you and actually nominate them higher than what you'd set kind of as your budget for them on that one, right? Like, so that could be problematic in there as well. So when it comes to nominating players on that, a couple of things that I really like doing is looking for some higher priced talent that you don't necessarily want out there, especially when it comes to like quarterbacks, tight ends in a auction salary cap type of draft, I will play the super late quarterback, super late tight end, and take both a quarterback by committee and a tight end by committee. And while everybody else is spending right in a $200 auction draft, salary cap type of draft, you may see Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, Trey McBride going for $40, $50 of the budget. And, you've got people spending 20 to 25% on one player that has one position type of thing in there, right? Whereas I'll go through it, I'll pick up the guys like Tyler Conklin, Cade Otton, Isaiah Likely. Like I've got no problem starting that off. And realistically, I've just spent $3 to $5 for 3 tight ends on there that I can play a committee approach and will likely see and be able to pick my spots and likely see a similar output season end out of the tight end position than going through and doing that, right? Like there is some of that to a set it and forget it and being able to kind of call your shot and get your guy right there. But that's a deal that you can go out there and do, right? So if I've got no desire to go out there and take a Kelce or a Laporta or a Trey McBride type of thing, nominate them out there, throw those nominations out there at lower bids as well, right? Like that's one of the other things. You start getting guys kind of, guys and gals starting to bid in and really starting to drive up the price as they go there, and they start becoming almost pot committed there, right? And it becomes that game within the game type of thing. And all of a sudden you can see a guy go for more than what what that was, because you've got a couple of, 3 folks really driving the price up on each other because they're now committed to the approach there. So quarterbacks, tight ends, that's a great way to do it, right? Same thing too with folks that are going to go out there and overspend on Patrick Mahomes or overspend on Josh Allen, to really kind of get those top tier guys, and especially most auction salary cap type of deals. Those are single quarterback leagues. That's fine. I'll go ahead and kick that can down the road and really take the Matthew Stafford's, Kirk Cousins, even potentially take some flyers on some younger quarterbacks there, the a Will Levis or a Bo Nix type of deal there as well, and see if I can't again replicate in the aggregate some of the performances that I'll get there, and just kind of pick the spot and play a quarterback by committee approach there. So those are a couple of options. And then when it comes to nominating your guy, go out there and put it to a point where if somebody's going to bid into that and going to enter into the fray, it's almost uncomfortable for them to go through and do that, right? Like, the opposite approach of that. You want to scare off folks coming in and wading into the waters with those bids coming in there before, people kind of get a little pot committed or get really, in the action and getting okay with the idea of, hey, I'm going to spend on this person to put them on my roster. So those are 2 ways that I find to really help kind of be able to get the folks that I like. And if you do that, where the first 2 nominations, you're throwing out higher price players that you're not going to do and allowing that to go through. And then in the third nomination or 4th nomination, you're going after somebody that you really want on your roster and setting that price up there a little bit. Now you've got folks kind of rethinking that strategy on entering into the bidding fray.
Well, absolutely.
A lot of good tips there. A lot of good tips that when it comes to auction drafts. But again, I go back to, and I think what kind of goes for all of this is patience, right? You got to be patient, and just know that you're going to see a lot of big names come and go and think, oh no, I'm missing out on all this. But well, you might be missing out on things. There's deals to be made later. There's money that can be allocated, and crazy enough, you can, if you get a guy for $10 less than maybe you anticipated, that's $10 extra that you can outbid somebody for the next guy, right? So like it all goes somewhere. Those coffers, it all goes somewhere. So it's a really, really, like, you just got to be patient and understand where you get your advantages.
Right. And actually the we've got a couple of comments coming in here. Chandler over on YouTube's asking if we answer fantasy questions. Absolutely, we do. Go ahead and throw them in the chat, and we'll rock and roll through there. And Chandler actually kind of helping illustrate the point that I was making here on some of these bidding type of strategies and going through that, right? So Chandler saying that the $100 salary for this league, Mahomes, Lamar, Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Hurts, Allen all went for over 20 on that, right? So 20% of 20+% of the budget spent on one player on this. And Chandler went out and got Purdy for $3 and Tua for $1 and feels like that's not a bad deal to split
it. Good job.
Yes.
Yeah. And Chandler, you probably were able to if you wanted to overspend on a different position and create an advantage that way. But yeah, quarterback is the easiest example because generally you have just one of them, right? And so it's the easiest example. But yeah, Chandler, you did well here by only spending $4 on two starting quarterbacks that you can kind of plug and play, any week.
Right. And oh, by the way, these are two guys that will likely be in back end QB1 territory when the season's all said and done, right? Like tremendous value here. And this really just kind of illustrates the point that I was just talking about when, nominating guys out there that are going to go for more than what you want to spend at the position and taking a couple of guys for far less and playing the aggregate there to be able to be competitive at the position. So absolutely love what you did there and the strategy there. Alrighty. Any other thoughts here on some, auction type of drafts, strategies? I know Alex can go all day and then some with this.
I got one coming up tomorrow. Again, it's my high school league, my high school buddies. And I got an auction draft coming up tomorrow. So we'll see. I haven't put too much thought into it yet as to who I really want to, overspend on. It's tough because while I know all of the guys that I'm playing with, and I've been in this league now for more than 10 years, I don't talk to them constantly. So I don't know where everybody, I know there's a giant Packers fan in this league. So sometimes Packers players go for a little bit more than they should. There's obviously some Broncos fans just because of where we're all from originally. But it's a unique league. I will say this, and this is when I say that the most important thing, if you are going to do an auction draft, make sure every single one of your league mates can participate, because there is nothing, and I mean nothing worse than having an auto draft go on and having the AI, bid and take out some of the human part of an auction, right? Like that's what's important about an auction draft, is that everybody that's in your league is participating, because the human element is what makes an auction fun, and it's what makes an auction frustrating. But it's the best part about it. And when you remove that, then it's not as fun or as frustrating, or you can't, you just need to have everyone participating. So if you're going to do an auction draft, make sure that you're not going up against any computers.
Right. Yeah. All of a sudden you get the guy that nobody wanted that was going to be like a, $2 or $3 thing. And now all of a sudden goes for 20.
Because the computer knows what's up. Right. And the computer has what very few people playing fantasy football in auction drafts have, which is a lack of irrationality and a lack of impulse. Right. So the computer has more discipline than anybody, could ever hope to have in an auction draft. So like it just ruins it. It ruins it for everybody else if you got a computer, picking for people.
Right. One of the other things too that will be beneficial when it comes to doing auction drafts, right, is we talked a couple of weeks ago and really last week about the tiers and going through that. This is a strategy in which you can really utilize your tiers to your advantage, right? Like the one of those that you don't want to necessarily just wait for a kind of the last guy in the tier break or anything like that, but you purposely kind of pencil in and put a little star next to the 2 or 3 guys in that tier that you really want on your roster, and those are the guys that you're going to go after and go get. And if the price gets up there too much to the point where you're not able to maintain value, cool, you can drop that down a little bit and potentially shift some of that that budget allocation that you had for that position or that kind of deal to another position and potentially get get an advantage there. So it's one of those that you want to be able to utilize the tiers to your advantage, and then kind of just stay fluid with the situation. And if it doesn't pan out, you shift, pivot, and pick your spot in the next position to go out and get the advantage.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Love them tiers, man. Love them tiers.
Yep. The old saying, if you don't draft with tiers, you will end up in tiers at your draft. So the any other thoughts here on any auction draft or salary cap strategies? Alrighty, awesome. Well, that's going to go ahead and move us into the old my guys. And so with this one here, right, we're going to go through and we're going to kind of talk about a couple of guys that are the my guys for each of us here going into this fantasy season, and guys that we really don't want to leave the draft without. Who wants to start us off here?
I'll let Kevin go first, and I'll let you peek behind the curtain a little bit. I haven't quite figured out who my guys are yet this year.
Oh man. So all right, I'm gonna start out with a wide receiver here, who is right now going in the 4th round in most drafts, and I am really liking him, even to mainly because a lot of strategies, if you're going an anchor RB, I can get him as my 3rd wide receiver, which I love. But I'm perfectly happy with him being my 2nd as well, if I'm ending up going a bit more of a balanced approach. And that is DK Metcalf. I love me some DK this year. I am really starting to, I shouldn't say starting to, I've been on him, but just watching this Seattle team, how much faster they're going to play. They're going to try and push the ball down the field a little bit. And I think DK Metcalf is going to have an outstanding year. So he is definitely one of my guys this year where I am doing just about anything I can, and I probably have him on 70% of my rosters this year, where you're just kind of starting from a blank slate. I am grabbing him up left and right, and I am going to ride or die with him as my wide receiver 2 or 3, just depending on the league this year. I'm loving some DK Metcalf.
Alex, hit us up with a.
All right, I'll give you one that it is also a receiver, and he's a later guy that I think will have an impact on the offense, at least with a chemistry standpoint, with the quarterback and everything going on there, and you can get him super duper late. I'm going to take Christian Kirk, who's been a little injured of late, but he's currently going wide receiver 31. I don't think that he finishes in wide receiver 3 territory, given what Jacksonville has on the roster there. Yes, he is going up against a Gabe Davis, and Evan Ingram's a great pass catching pass catching tight end option for Trevor Lawrence. But Trevor Lawrence is going to throw the ball. They're going to throw the ball down there in Jacksonville. Christian Kirk is, in theory, wide receiver 1 in that offense. And I think that he will be a good option there. So I think with him as wide receiver 1, where you're getting him, you can get him on the cheap, right? He's way down there at wide receiver 31 overall. I think he's going somewhere in the, I don't know, 70 range, I think, 68, 50, 60 range. That to me is really good value for what I think a guy that's going to return not wide receiver 31 stats at the end of the year.
Fair enough. Yeah, I sat there and I started kind of going through this when we were pulling this up, and we had the idea for this tonight on that, and you're really kind of trying to looking through, and there's several guys that kind of fit the bill for my guy for me this year. But I went through and started looking at a lot of my exposure to certain players in drafts, because I think that's probably one of the easiest ways to tell who who my guy is for you, because you're constantly drafting them every time that they come available. And a guy that's I was really surprised when I was really going through and looking at my exposure for this fantasy season is surprisingly enough a tight end that's taken before round 10. And so that being the case, it was Evan Ingram. I've got Evan Ingram in so many different leagues, it's not even funny. And kind of right where he's coming off the board at the tail end of a kind of a 5th round pick nowadays, right? He was I'm sorry, 6th round pick there. He was coming off the board, later into the 7th and 8th through much of the offseason here, but he is slowly but surely been creeping up those draft boards there. But Evan Ingram is a guy that I have a really hard time in that 6th, 7th round when I'm staring that pick down, not hitting draft on that one. And I think that this is a guy, again, that's going to have an amazing season when it's all said and done.
Very good. Another wide receiver that I'm liking a little bit later is T. Higgins.
Mm-hmm.
I think T. Higgins is falling off the face of the earth, and I understand that Jamar Chase was a hold in. I know that he's reported back, but some of those reps that T. Higgins got with Joe Burrow and the confidence and the chemistry that those two were continuously building upon is not going to be replaceable. And I think that T is going to have a very good year because of his decision to get into camp and be a part of this team from the get-go. He's a guy that you can get in the 5th round right now. Guys going around him, George Pickens, Zay Flowers, Tank Dell. I would rather have T. Higgins than any of those guys. So I like the offense slightly more. I know Tank Dell's attached to Houston, but he's the 3rd guy. I have a whole slew of reasoning of why Tank Dell is not going to have a good year in Houston. Part of it is people aren't paying attention to who they're keeping on the roster. And I can close the show with that. But I'm telling you right now, if you're drafting Tank Dell, you are set up to be really bummed out this year. He is not going to do what he did last year when it was him and Nico. He is now the odd man out in Houston for this season. But nevertheless, T. Higgins, clearly there. He's playing for a contract. He's on the franchise tag. He wants to get paid, elite type money, right? Jalen Waddle-esque, Devonta Smith-esque. Like that market for that number 2 receiver is kind of set. And he can surpass that by having a great year because he can go to a team and be their number 1 guy and kind of split that difference between that Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith side, and then where Tyreek, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb on. Like he will be able to kind of split that gap there. And this is going to be his time. I love guys on a contract here, so he is one of my guys.
I'm going to go to a running back, and I hope I don't step on somebody's toes, but every week I listen to 2 really smart fantasy football players, and one of them has been pounding the table for the last couple of weeks about this guy. And you're going to have to spend a little early. But if what he's been saying comes to fruition, you're going to be okay with what you have to spend on him. And that is Derrick Henry this year. If Derrick Henry can do what Kevin says he's going to do and break that touchdown record, which is entirely possible there in Baltimore, you're going to be able to laugh all the way to the championship game with just his touchdown points. A little scary because his bye week is week 14, but that's okay. He's coming off running back 8 on the board, basically 11th overall, 12th overall. So he's a first rounder, but if you are in the back half of that first round and you're trying to decide, where do I go? I think Derrick Henry's a guy that if I'm in the back half of any drafts on the first round, Derrick Henry's a guy that I wouldn't feel too bad about taking right there. That's one.
That is one. You got my fair enough in there. So I do like the Derrick Henry called, and Kevin was certainly the first one on that Derrick Henry train. So that may have been stepping on a my guy there, but I like it. The a guy that I am really enjoying putting on my fantasy rosters, left, right, and center, and a guy that honestly just seems like he is incredibly undervalued this draft season, which is interesting, right? Because this is a guy that put up a top 24 wide receiver scoring this last season, right? And this is a guy that they went through and they named the quarterback earlier this week in Vegas, being Gardner Minshew, which some of us on this show had already been saying for months now that would be the starting quarterback for that, and had been making plans as such when it comes to some of these early best ball drafts and going through some of these startups and all of that we've done. But a guy that I am absolutely, when I get to the 11th, 12th round, this is the guy that I'll even reach for in the 10th round, just to make sure that I get my guy here. And that is Jacoby Myers, right? He's currently coming off the board in the 140 to 150th range, depending upon kind of which draft you're looking at there. He's a wide receiver 54 off the board in many instances. This is a guy that, when it's all said and done, will not surprise me to see him easily finish inside, wide receiver 3 territory at worst. And I think that we could very well see him again get into that fringe wide receiver 2 territory, back half wide receiver 2 territory. And this is a guy that, when I'm there drafting in the 12th round, yes, please, just sign me up, hit draft, move on. And I am extremely happy every time that I can walk away with Jacoby Myers on my roster.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I like that pick a lot. I think one of the other my guys who I have a ton of in it used to be the 12th, now it's creeping up to the 10th, and I'm still okay doing it, is TJ Hawkinson.
Uh-huh.
I have a boatload of TJ Hawkinson, and I'm okay having to double tap tight end rather quickly to pair him up with, whether it's a Jake Ferguson. I did it in the league where TJ Hawkins is my first tight end. I paired him up with Kate Otten. I'm okay. I'm okay everywhere else, I feel like. So I'm a little weak at tight end until Hawkinson's back. But Sam Darnold is not going to light the world on fire, right? But Sam Darnold will play within this offense. I believe he learned a lot in San Francisco. And part of what he learned in San Francisco is how to feature your number 1 receiver and your tight end, and even your number 2 receiver, right? Because they don't have the run game that San Francisco had. He's going to have to throw the ball. We expect Minnesota to be losing a lot of games. There's going to be a ton of targets to go around once Hawkinson's back on the field. And so I will draft Hawkinson in the 10th, knowing that I'm going to have to sit on him for probably 6 weeks, right? Their bye week is week 6, I believe. And then after the bye week is when I think they're going to let Hawkinson kind of cut loose. And I'm okay with that, because I then feel like I have a top 5 caliber tight end for the rest of the season, and his bye week's already passed. So TJ Hawkinson, for a guy I can get in the 10th round, and the star power that he can and does have, is absolutely my guy for the value I'm getting for him right now.
All right. My last one here is, I'm going to go another running back. And I still can't figure out why he's going where he's going, but it's Chuba Hubbard. in a guy that I think is criminally undervalued right now. I know Miles Sanders is still on the roster, and maybe that's what's scaring people away. But as it sits right now, Chuba Hubbard's the lead back there in Carolina. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. Last year, he had 200 some odd receiving yards on 39 catches with a quarterback that had no time to do anything. Maybe if the quarterback has a little bit more time and the game slows down a little bit, he rushed for 900 yards. If the touchdown number goes up, he probably finishes instead of just outside of RB2 territory, firmly inside of RB2 territory. He's going 40th. So you're talking fourth round ish. I think that's where he's running back 43. So overall, I think that's, hold on, let me find that for you where if I can. Got him going 134. So you're getting great value there. 134 divided by 12, 12th round-ish, 12th, 13th round, basically in a 12 draft or 12 team redraft. So to have 134 overall, a guy that I think is going to finish RB2 territory, maybe sniff top end of RB2 territory, sign me up for that all day and twice on Sunday.
Fair enough. So a guy that's kind of my guy here is a guy that, again, when I looked up at the end of the a lot of these best ball drafts and kind of looking at the overall exposure to these things, I was a little surprised that I had this many this much exposure to this guy, but it makes perfect sense. And a guy that, right, we've talked about some of these guys that are being kind of undervalued and really underdrafted. And the guy that I have, this last my guy, is coming off the board at pick 170 to 200, depending upon your draft. Right, in most cases, the draft is completing and he's still on the board. So this is a guy that really like as a last round flyer, potential waiver, week one waiver wire pickup here. And he's coming off the board right now as wide receiver 69, and that is Darnell Mooney, who, right, everybody's talking about this Atlanta offense and how it's going to be far more improved, and we're going to see the a lot of these players take the next step. Players like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. The beautiful thing about Kirk Cousins is he does support and can feed a multitude of players. We've seen him do it for several years. The wide receiver 2 in Minnesota for several years was very fantasy relevant, and Darnell Mooney has clearly cemented himself as the wide receiver 2 on this roster, and we'll see a large percentage of snap share percentage, and I think will drastically outperform the wide receiver 69 that he's coming off the board currently. And it will not surprise me when we look up at the end of the season and this guy is firmly in wide receiver 3 territory. And this is a guy that you took for the last round that could be a week in, week out flex type of play. That's kind of my guy. Any other thoughts on my guys?
No, I think there's a bunch, right? I mean, there's definitely a bunch. We tried to scatter it around here a little bit, but I think the one position we didn't necessarily touch on is quarterback, right? So is there a quarterback that you guys feel like would classify as a my guy quarterback?
Dak.
That's
smash yes, move on. Like, love the value where he's coming off the board. I think he's criminally underdrafted and undervalued for fantasy. This is a guy that's right. Kevin, you and I have been going through this one and keep kind of referring back to this all off season, and Alex is referred to this one as well. But there's a lot of going back over the several seasons, like 55 starts in there. Dak, Patrick Mahomes, touchdown numbers, percentage completion, yards, all of the things there are eerily similar. So sign me up for a guy that I can take with a much later draft capital and see similar performance too?
I'll go with Jared Goff, partly because I want a rooting interest in the Lions this year, and that's probably the easiest one. I also like David Montgomery too there, so like I'm probably going to have a fair amount of shares of David Montgomery when it's all said and done. But for quarterbacks, yeah, I like Jared Goff. Again, guy that's going 15th. I think he can easily finish QB1. He's got Amon-Ra St. Brown as an option, right? And so if we think that Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be what we think Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be, in theory, Jared Goff gets him there, right? So Jared Goff is a quarterback that I think you can sit on, you can get late, and he will finish in the upper half of QB1 or right at QB6 overall.
No, so I'm really comfortable with a lot of quarterbacks, and they're all kind of around this range. I'm really comfortable with Dak. Derek talked about that. I'm very comfortable with Jared Goff as well. A guy that just kind of consistently finds himself on my roster from when I'm finally looking at quarterback is Brock Purdy. Like I continuously have Brock Purdy on my roster, and it's his efficiency. It's the fact that he will go out and just win games. You get a little bit of rushing action with Brock Purdy, not a ton, but just a little bit helps keep everything honest. But the fact that he will throw the ball to McCaffrey, obviously having Debo, Ayuk, if they can get that finalized this week, and George Kittle, I think helps that. But that offense in San Francisco is just smooth. I'll tell you the one thing that does give me pause, Ayuk, yeah, that gives me pause. It's Trent Williams. The Niners need to figure out Trent Williams because that is scaring me a little bit off of Brock Purdy as we get close to, especially our home league and what that looks like. And it was a big reason why I just gave up the value on using him as a keeper, because not having your starting left tackle, the San Francisco 49ers are a bit of a different team. So that worries me a little bit. So I guess a little buyer beware, but I do have him in a ton of places just because when I finally start looking at quarterback, Brock Purdy always seems to be the guy that I am most comfortable with. I like the weapons that he has the most and just the team buildup, knowing that he's going to have good situations with the ball in his hands.
Right. Yeah, no, I like that. Well, and it's not just any left tackle, right? Like it's Trent Williams, one of the best left tackles in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I do understand the hesitation on that one. All right. Any other thoughts on my guys? We ready to head on?
I'm good.
All right. So before we get to our next section, which is the not draftable type of players, we do have a couple of questions coming in. So Tober over on YouTube saying, "What is up, guys? Who should I keep this season? It's between Kyren, Puka, and Jefferson." And there is a draft penalty with the keeper on this one. Jefferson would be a first round. Puka and Kyren would be a 7th round since they were picked up off of the waivers. So between Jefferson, Kyren, and Puka, who would you keep on this one, knowing that Jefferson would be a first rounder, Kyren and Puka would be 7th rounders?
I would keep Kyren.
That's 2.
That's 2.
Damn it. I would keep I keep Puka in the 7th, although Kyren in the 7th is a great deal. I don't know that Jefferson first round. I think you let him go and hope that you might be able to get him back with your first round pick.
Yeah, that's it's one of those that, if you're keeping a first rounder, right, like you probably should be picking all the way at the back of the first round and keeping like a Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill. Like you should be keeping a guy that's going 101, 102 type of thing, and you're drafting 12. Right, like that's where the value, and that's where it makes sense to me to keep a guy that's with a first round capital. Other than that, if that's not the case, I'm going to kick that can on down the road, and I'll find somebody else in my first round because there should be tons of value still there. And so I would lean the Puka and the Kyren in the 7th. Personally, I'd probably lean the Kyron route there a little bit, just from the standpoint that Puka is still dealing with some injury here. Has missed a fair bit of time here this preseason. Kind of going through that. So Kyron at least appears to be healthy at this point, or the healthier of the two options for that 7th rounder. And so I would take Kyron with the 7th and let the chips fall with that one as they may. Any other thoughts on on that one? All righty. And then Chandler had a question in here. Y'all see where Kyron would be doing punt and kickoff returns. How do you think that affects him at RB? It did see that McVay did have those reports coming out earlier today. If your league gets points for the cheat points for yards returns and fantasy or special teams play, great. But at this point, yeah, I don't know that necessarily affects him much unless getting banged up in special teams.
I'm not worried about it. He was an Iron Man when he came back from injury. Like, he was playing 85+% of the snaps, which is unheard of for running backs these days when he came back the back half of last year. So McVay obviously feels comfortable with him. I think people want to read into this more than what it is. He's absolutely still going to be running the football for them and being able to catch passes. He's probably also their most dynamic guy, right? Like, Puka's been injured, so Puka might do it once he gets healthy, but Kyron's going to start. Another guy that they might look at, right, wrong, or indifferent, Puka's chirping in Sean's ear, like, hey, like, if there's a roster spot, look at my brother. Look what he just did on this kickoff return. Like, he can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we'll see how the NFL reacts, right? Like, do we go back to return specialists like we had in the 90s and the early 2000s? If we go back to return specialists, maybe there's roster spots created for these guys. Other than that, like, you have to be able to be an option on the field and play special teams. There's not too many guys who are on a roster just for what they do on special teams.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts on this one?
Nah.
All right. Chandler also saying Evan Ingram got 50% of his points last year when Kirk wasn't on the field. Feel it's like a bit of a trap this year. Rather take chances on Kittle, Pitts, Ferguson, or Njoku.
Evan Ingram also only had 6 red zone targets because they had Calvin Ridley, who is no longer there. So you lose part of that because Kirk is on the field, but you probably gain red zone targets. And right, wrong, or indifferent, quarterbacks don't forget guys who do right by them. It wasn't Christian Kirk's fault that he was injured, but there will be room for both of them in this offense, right? Gabe Davis I don't think Gabe Davis is going to be a factor. I think Brian Thomas is going to be kind of the deep threat. He'll play outside, kind of be that traditional X. Gabe is going to be, highs and lows, just like he was in Buffalo. And Kirk will work outside or inside out. Evan Ingram will work outside in. I don't see any issue with that.
Right. Well, and right now, Evan Ingram's coming off the board tight end 8. The last 2 seasons in Jacksonville, his worst finish was tight end 6. So you're not concerned about that one at all, right? Like, you're still drafting him, I think, below his floor when it's all said and done. Chandler also saying, would you rather have Curtis or Jacoby Myers? I'd rather take the Jacoby Myers experiment.
Yeah, I would too. I'm not buying that Curtis Samuel is going to be the go-to there in Buffalo.
Right.
There's a lot of question marks in Buffalo right now.
Right. I keep seeing reports that Keon Coleman is impressing and will likely have a big role there. So they very well may take the guy that they drafted early in the second to be their guy to start leading that room early into this in his rookie year. So a lot of questions there. Granted, I get the intrigue with Curtis Samuel and pairing back up with Joe Brady, who that's as the offensive coordinator, and when those two were paired up, Curtis Samuel had his career year and had a great fantasy production. But I like the outcome of Myers potentially better there. All right. Any other thoughts on any of these questions?
No.
All righty. Let's go ahead and head on over to the do not draft list. So, and this guy's here to kind of paint a little bit of a, how this, or the reason for this, why this exists, all of that kind of stuff. Isn't necessarily that we're not saying don't draft these guys, period. It's at their current value, guys that we're shying away from at their ADP, things of that nature. So that's kind of the precursor and the asterisks on that, because I'm sure we'll get some of the comments later on about, so-and-so said not to draft this guy. Well, anyway, there we go. Guys, let's go ahead and put up one or two guys that you've got on the do not draft list. Who's starting us off?
I'll go for it, because I still, for the life of me, cannot figure out why he's going where he is going. And that's Marvin Harrison Jr. in a redraft league right now. Like, I have no idea why he's coming off the board 14th overall, why he's the 9th receiver that's coming off the board. I get it. He was a high draft pick, and it is easier to make an impact on the field the further away you are from the ball. I understand all that. I understand that, of the options that they have for wide receiver down there, he is probably the best one. It is Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch. You got Trey McBride playing tight end there. So I understand that he is the best of the option, but man, I don't know if he's the best option. Don't you think that defenses will also make sure that they don't get beat by him? I don't get it. So I'm staying away from Marvin Harrison Jr. this year, especially with where he's coming off the board. That's a big no from me.
Okay. I'm also thinking along the same lines as a rookie receiver, but I'm going Malik Neighbors. I don't understand why he's going at the top end of the third round. I don't see any offensive line improvement in New York for the Giants. I don't see confidence in their quarterback. There's a reason they kept 3 guys in that quarterback room. I don't see a number 2 option that's going to take pressure away from Malik Neighbors. He's going to have to adjust to the NFL game. Like there's so much about this that I like the player. I don't like the situation this year, and I don't like the capital that I have to spend on Malik Neighbors for this year. Taking him in the first round of a rookie draft, obviously no brainer, right? Like if you couldn't get Harrison, you're getting Neighbors. I totally get that. So in dynasty leagues, it's a little bit different, but in redrafts, to take him right there at the 2-3 turn at the top of the third round is just far too rich and far too risky for what I'm willing to do.
Fair enough. So I'm going to go ahead and switch positions here a little bit. I like both of those points there, and definitely guys that I really, when it comes to redraft or best ball, I really don't have any shares of Malik or Marvin Harrison Jr. So a guy that I am shying away from heavily when it comes to the drafting. I don't know that I, in any redraft or best ball, I don't have a single share of Josh Allen at this point. Right, this is a guy that in the second round pick, I want to go other directions on this one than try and narrow this thing in. Right, there is. I think that we're going to see a lot of regression when this one comes through. Right, he had 15 rushing touchdowns last season. Right, that was a career high, and a career high by quite a bit there. So we hadn't seen a double-digit rushing touchdown from him at any other point in his career, right? Well, he's averaged well over 4,000 yards each of the last 4 seasons. I don't know. Like, there's too many question marks in Buffalo at the wide receiver and the pass catching position to think that we're going to see him easily kind of cruise by and get that 43, 44, 4,500 yards, in that neighborhood and right around 30 plus touchdowns. So, when it's all said and done, the secret sauce for Josh Allen has been the fact that we've routinely seen him put up 40 plus touchdowns in each of these last 4 seasons, where we've seen him finish QB1, QB1, QB2, QB1 type of finishes there. I think we see massive touchdown regression out of Buffalo. I think we see a regression in passing yards, and I think we see a regression in rushing touchdowns there as well. So Josh Allen is a guy that at his current ADP, I am not drafting. And not only is there a lot of regression in there, the strength of schedule for Buffalo is brutal this season.
So I'll stay with the quarterbacks here for a second. One guy that I am not drafting where he's going is Caleb Williams. I think he has the tools to be a very good fantasy quarterback if he keeps his head in football. But for this season, I'm not buying it. I think Tua has just as good, if not better, weapons around him with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle and what that run game has to offer as far as balance goes. I think Jared Goff has tons of weapons around him that he can absolutely outproduce where he's going. I would rather wait a little bit longer and take the next quarterback or 2 quarterbacks down and go just outside of that realm and feel better over Caleb Williams.
I'm probably going to get some flack for this one, but
boo.
I'm going to move to the tight end spot. I'm going to say George Kittle. There's so many mouths to feed, and Kittle, yes, he finished what was it, tight end 6 last year, tight end 5 is what he finished last year.
Look where the Cowboy game.
Exactly. That's what so that's my point, is if you take away basically he had a huge game against Cincinnati where he had 9 catches for 149 yards. He had a huge game against Dallas where he had 3 touchdowns and he finished the season with 6. You take away those games, and you can't because they happen, but those are anomalies in my opinion, right? You can't bank on a 3 touchdown game and then what do you get the rest of it? Bumpkus, right? So George Kittle is a guy that if I'm waiting on tight end, I'm waiting for someone else to take him. It is not the headache that I'm going to deal with. I think there are many other pass catching options there in San Francisco. So George Kittle is just a guy that I'm not drafting this year.
Fair enough. I'm going to another guy that's on my do not draft list is kind of painful because he was in that my guy type of territory last year, right? And a teammate of George Kittle. So a guy that I am not drafting this season is Brandon Ayuk, right? A guy coming off the board, wide receiver 16, kind of in that 33rd overall. So a 3rd round type of draft capital that I would be having to utilize on a guy that really hasn't seen much of the preseason work, right? The reports are very kind of mixed bag coming out of San Francisco. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? What does this truly look like? And what does that look like for a player that we've seen this play out several times before, where guys that miss significant time during the preseason training camp, things like that, they can take a little while to get going in that as well. And a guy that I'm taking with 3rd round draft capital, I want to be able to see that player step in and immediately be a day 1 starter and at this point, potentially be my wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 for my roster to start leading that towards fantasy glory. Any other do not draft guys we want to hit up?
Josh Jacobs is one of those guys for me. Like I am staying very clear of Josh Jacobs. I was not overly impressed with what he did in Las Vegas last year. I get that they just put AJ Dillon on the IR, but you still have Marshawn Lloyd. Like, yes, he's going to start out getting some volume, but they did pay Jordan Love, a good hefty sum, and he has a plethora of weapons around him, right? That wide receiver room easily goes 4 deep, easily. And I understand that, they're going to want to stay balanced in a Matt LaFleur offense, but I am just not sold on where Josh Jacobs is going and that he's going to return the value of, a borderline top 12 running back this year.
Yeah, fair enough. Alex, any other guys on your do not draft, do not pass go list?
No, those two are the two that I'm really shying away from.
Fair enough.
Everybody else I could be talked into.
Fair enough. I like it. Well, we'll go ahead and is there any other thoughts we want to hit up here? I know Kevin was saving a thought here towards the end of the show.
Oh yeah, you got another one with a tank.
With a tank, yeah. So the Houston Texans kept a fullback on their roster. Did you guys realize this? So when you keep a fullback on your roster, you are running 12 personnel, right? So 12 personnel is, 1 running back, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end. And then you have your fullback is the buffer there. The reason you run 12 personnel is because it makes the defense commit to another man inside the box because of the fullback. This is what the San Francisco 49ers do. This is what the Miami Dolphins do a lot. They run a lot of 12 personnel in different formats, but they do run a lot of 12 personnel. And it's what the Baltimore Ravens do a lot, is run 12 personnel. This is starting to catch on because a lot of these teams, when you're going to 13 personnel, right? 1 tight end, 3 receivers. Basically, all these teams are going into a cover 2 shell and forcing everything in front of them, right? They can play it deep and they're just going to attack and limit the big play. Going back to the 12s, when you have 2 wide receivers on the field, that means you don't have a third and you follow the money. Who got paid in Houston? Diggs and Nico, right? So Diggs and Collins are the 2 wide receivers that got paid. They also paid Dalton Schultz to stick around, right? So he's kind of there. And they also paid Joe Mixon. Did they pay Tank Dell?
No, still on their rookie deal. Second year.
Still on that rookie deal, right? And that's fine. I'm not saying they don't like the guy, right? So don't get me wrong. This is based off of draft position, right? This is telling you that Tank Dell is not worth it in the 5th or the 6th. If Tank Dell slides to the 8th, yeah, maybe you take a flyer on him. But this is Tank Dell, and is very much, he's going to get his snaps and he's going to fill in, but he's not going to be a focal point of this offense this season. That's just not how this offense is constructed. It's not where the money goes. It's not how anything about this offense is set up. And to keep CJ Stroud, I don't want to say relevant, but more dynamic, you want more people in the box to give him more room to throw downfield to a Stephon Diggs and a Nico Collins. So the way the Houston Texans are fundamentally set up this year, they are going to be playing with a fullback. And because said fullback is in the game, it's one less wide receiver. Tank Dell, that's why I'm saying he's the odd man out this year. So buyer beware of taking him in the 5th round. That's why I think you're going to be sorely disappointed with anybody who takes that pick that early. He is not going to return value based off of target share, snap share, or routes run for a 5th round wide receiver.
Fair enough. I like it. All righty. The Gator J popping in here saying, Gator J's been a minute, glad to be back. Absolutely. Welcome back into the chat there, Gator J. Good seeing you. Well, guys, that's gonna kind of take us down here to the end of it. Any kind of final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
Enjoy your drafts, right?
Yeah,
It's
good
kind of
luck.
we're in the final week,
Yeah.
right? We are not going to be talking drafts come Tuesday, other than a recap of our home league. So be sure to hit up YouTube, check out the videos. All of our content will be there if you guys want takes on just draft strategy or thoughts on drafts. But we are accessible, so hit us up at Good Old Boys FF wherever y'all consume your social media content. Shoot us a note. Obviously, go to YouTube, like, subscribe, get that bell, so that way you guys know when we're coming live next Tuesday. And then we're gonna be jumping right into it, right? We're gonna be talking division winners. We're gonna be talking kind of season expectations. We're gonna be talking about Thursday night football and Friday night football, which is gonna be, Derek, our first Friday night show.
I know.
There's a game on. Like,
I know.
it's gonna be kind of a bummer. Because I really want to watch that game between the Eagles and Packers. So I might be streaming that as we're doing our show. But yeah, so a lot of good things coming, but hit us up. We're more than happy to help out with, draft questions, trade questions. Obviously, we'll get into all the waiver wire stuff, but the fun is only beginning, right? The hard part is studying for the draft and executing. And now the fun starts, right? We get to maintain, we get to make roster adjustments, and we get to bait people into trades and win fantasy championships, because that's why we play this. It's fun, but we play to win the game.
Thank you, Coach Green.
It was Edwards.
That was Herm, wasn't it? Was that Herm?
That was Herm. That was Herm.
Coach Green was, they are who we thought they were.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
And we let them off the hook.
Alex, any final thoughts out there?
I know, but I'm mixing up my coaches, so I probably need to shut it down for the night.
Fair enough. All righty. Well, that's going to do it for us. And like Kevin said, we'll be back next Tuesday. Got a full slate there. It'll be a lot of fun. And then next week as well, we're one Friday away from having the Bet Set Snap back and ready to go on Friday night. So that'll be fun. Look forward to seeing everybody back there as well. That's going to do it for us. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.